Mandy, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
So from very serious topics, we're going to talk about love. And look at Mandy's shirt.
I couldn't help myself.
So Mandy, you are the CEO of Match Group. And for those who don't know, Match Group is the $11 billion market value spinoff of IAC. It was spun off in 2015. And it owns brands in online dating, including Match.com, Tinder, OkCupid, basically every brand you've probably heard of. Other ones you haven't, like RepublicansMeet.com, DemocratsMeet.com, and all sorts of affinity groups. So much for bipartisanship. Anyway, it's great to have you here. Mandy took over as CEO in January. There is a lot of drama in this business. Since you've started, it's been basically nonstop drama. We are going to talk about that. It's not just about Facebook. But in the meantime, can you just tell us how you came to Match and what you see as your kind of mission for the company?
Yeah, sure. I got a call in 2005. Which is sort of remarkable because online dating was very different back then. In fact, it was so funny because Match was the pioneer in the category. It was really the only brand back then. And at the time, Match was known as like the hookup site, which now the world has changed.
Well, Tinder is now that, but we can talk about that.
Yes, we can. So I was called because they were looking for someone to run a startup called Chemistry.com. That was a innovator, really the second brand. And so that's how I started my career, launching that second brand at Match. And of course, now we're dozens of brands across the globe, so the world has changed. But the reason that it was so perfect for me, aside from the fact that I had spent so much of my career in consumer marketing and understanding consumer insights, but my friends all said, this is perfect for you because I had 4 couples, matches under my belt. Like, you're the matchmaker, you're like the perfect yenta to go take
real life matches.
Real life matches with friends, college friends and high school friends. And so it started out my career, and there's sort of no other business out there where CEOs get letters that say, thank you for connecting us. Actually, the woman who's responsible for this in the
Sasha, our stage manager.
She said that 10 years ago, she met her love of her life on Chemistry. So no better mission than that.
Yeah, on Chemistry.com, yeah. So let's talk about Tinder for a minute. Tinder, for the past few years, has really been the engine of Match Group's growth. It also is a rare example of an incubation that came out of a very big company. It was actually created inside IAC. And I'm sure everybody knows what Tinder is, but it really invented the swipe, and it sort of became this cultural phenomenon and changed the way people really behave. For good and for bad. But talk about that a little bit, that growth, and how you really need to keep that going, because that's always the danger when you have something that's a lightning in a jar like that.
That's right, and keeping the year-over-year comps growing is always a big challenge. But what happened at Tinder 5 years ago, and it's only been around for 5 years, is it really exploded. And what I don't know if people understand, it went viral, but not just in the U.S. It went viral in 190 countries around the globe where we operate, and that word of mouth happened, almost overnight. We haven't seen anything quite like it in the category, and so I think, for us, it's really around continuing to innovate and push innovation and that growth engine, and I think there's still a lot of opportunity at Tinder.
Now, a few months ago, getting to the drama, 2 months into your tenure as CEO, you filed a lawsuit against Bumble, which is a very hot startup that was started by a former employee, co-founder, VP of marketing from Tinder, Whitney Wolf, who left the company after she filed a sexual harassment lawsuit. There was a settlement. This has been well written about. This is sort of old news by now, but this is important because she started this company where the big difference was also a swiping app, but the women go first, which was a very of-the-moment idea. It took off, but in March, Match Group filed a patent infringement lawsuit against Bumble, and it became this very public fight that we'll talk a little bit about. But why was it important to you to file that lawsuit?
Well, in November, December time period, right before I became CEO, we had been working over the past several years to hear back from the U.S. Patent Office around getting this patent, which is swipe and unlocking communication. And we all talk about the swipe. It's in our nomenclature.
Has anybody swiped here? Just be honest. It's OK. All right. There's still a little bit of a stigma in this industry, which we'll also talk about. But thank you for being honest.
Yeah, but before 5 years ago, no one heard about it. And we wanted to protect that IP. And we're constantly innovating on our products. And so we made a decision after we received that patent, and we thought it was a very defensible patent, that we really wanted to look across the organization for people who've knocked off the technology. And so we did just that. So we protected that IP and went after a couple of different companies. In fact, it wasn't one, it was 4 companies that we reached out to ask them to stop using our intellectual property. So that happened. Frankly, it's pretty standard or so I thought it was standard, because lots of patents are not that exciting, and people defend their patents all the time. And then the second month that I was the CEO, and it's the first time I'd been a public company CEO, I scheduled a number of meetings in New York to meet with the press. I think it was the day I met you.
I think it was.
For the first time. So, and we'd stacked up all these meetings to sort of have me come out and meet the press, because I'd spent so much of my years at Match sort of heads down running businesses. And that was the morning where I opened up the paper and there was a full page ad from this startup. Not very happy about that decision.
So Bumble basically waged this intense vitriolic counterattack after this lawsuit. They took out a front page ad in the New York Times. They said, we swipe left on you, Match Group. Swipe left is euphemism for we disavow you, we'll never be yours, not at any price. And they countersued a few days later. And Bumble's allegations were, it came out through this brouhaha that you had been talking to them for months about a possible merger and had been at odds about price. And they were saying that your lawsuit was a tactic to strong arm them into selling and to poison them to the rest of the investment community. So what do you say to that?
Well, I think the first thing is, we are Match and IC, and like I said, I started 12 years ago. There was one brand, and now through acquisitions and through incubations, we've acquired a ton of companies. We're highly acquisitive, and we're always talking to companies in the category. And so that's sort of not news, and we don't really comment on acquisitions, but that's people assume that we're doing that. The challenge, at least for me, and especially given I've been in the industry a long time, I've had, we've got 1,500 employees, a lot of people have worked for me, and the one thing that they know about me is that I'm pretty much of a straight shooter, and I also have integrity. And so I think out the gate, my second month as public company CEO, to hear that I was a bully and that I did not have integrity, it was definitely hard. But I just, what I told the company, and I think the employees' feedback was great, and the investor community, et cetera, was we've got to defend the innovations that we create. And I'm putting real pressure on the team to continue to innovate, not just within the products that we have, but also create new products, and that can't stop.
This is still tied up in the courts and will be for a while, but you have said you have great respect for Whitney Wolfe Herd, and you've said you have a very nice relationship. I mean, is it crazy to suggest that you two might end up together after all?
You never know what will happen. I think what she's done is she's built a great brand, particularly in the US, and expanding, and that's why we were in discussions with them to begin with, because you have to give her a lot of respect on what she's done. And I just think you can fiercely, these categories are very competitive. I mean, online dating is very competitive too, but you can fiercely compete and still respect each other.
Spoken like a woman leader, if I might say. Okay, now, while that was going on in the background, all of a sudden, May 1st, you're going about your business, and Mark Zuckerberg is at F8 introducing whatever's coming, and out of the blue says they're entering the online dating market, which is not something that anybody really predicted. And so where were you when that happened, and how did you react?
Are you suggesting that drama follows me?
Maybe. It looks like that.
It feels like that. No, so it was so funny. So this is my second earnings as public company CEO, and it was a couple days before we were going to release our earnings, and I literally just finalized my remarks. I was typing, finalized my remarks, hit print, and their pages were coming off, and I had it in front of me, and then all of a sudden, my text started going crazy, and I looked down, and honest to God, the stock started dropping $1 a minute. I was like, you got to be kidding, what the hell's going on?
It went down 22% that day.
Yeah, so, and I'm just sitting there, like we haven't done anything. And so all these people at F8 that were, on our technology team and product that were, at the F8 conference, they had texted me, and so it was funny. I picked up the piece of paper and I just threw them across the room, and I said, I got to start all over because there's going to be one topic on this call, which there was, and so we came up pretty strong, and I think that, people ask me about it all the time. I mean, even last night, people were asking me what I thought. And, for those of you who follow Match and Match Group and see our stock, which, we're over a $10 billion value company, a lot of that growth is driven by Tinder. Tinder's also a very young, 20-something audience product. And so there's a couple of arguments that I've made, and when people ask me, is that first of all, people in their 20s don't really want to date on a platform where their parents are. So everyone knows that in the room. That's very clear. We see that in our own we are a portfolio of categories. We don't see people who are 60 and 20 on the same platform. So we know that. The second thing is that when Tinder launched 5 years ago, the only way you could sign up was through Facebook Connect. And we made a decision last year to give people different options. So we gave them the option to sign up through text. And it was like the second small option below. When we did that last year, of course we didn't know this announcement, when we did that last year, 75% of users came in and opted to separate their Facebook life from their dating life. And so there's a clear decision that people were making. And so we think, we'll see how things play out, but we actually think people want to keep it separate. And then the last point is that for people who are dating, and for those of you who might have raised your hands, you'll know this, when you have intent and you really want to get out there and meet someone, you're generally on more than one app. In fact, you're on 3. So in terms of Facebook displacing Tinder from people using one of those apps being Tinder, we think that there's a really pretty low, sort of low likelihood for that to happen. And the one thing we'll have to figure out is Facebook's always been sort of implicit dating. I mean, this is not, it was, the timing might have been a shocker, just given everything that's going on in the news with Facebook, but this is not, they've sort of been in the category because people meet old sweethearts and friends of friends, and they reach out to people that they might have met at a party. The difference is it's explicit, so we'll have to continue to watch. You should never underestimate Facebook, given the scale and size, but at this point we feel pretty good, and we have the advantage that all we do is focus on one thing, which is we have over 1,000 engineers and product people that are focusing on love and relationships, and that's, I think, an advantage for us.
So how do you do that? So your holy grail is predicting chemistry between two strangers. And what can technology do that it's not doing right now to help further that along?
Well, I actually left for a couple years during that period to go work for another business in the education space, still at IEC and Match Group, and I thought, gosh, with the explosion, this was during the explosion of all the apps, and I thought during that time, every problem has been fixed because everyone's using these apps now. When I got back, I realized these problems haven't been solved. The holy grail is still around being able to predict who you're going to have chemistry with when you actually you don't date online, you actually date across a table from each other when you're drinking a cup of coffee or a glass of wine. And so that is the holy grail. And so everything that we do from a technology innovation perspective has got to be figuring out how do we improve that connection, that chemistry. And so the example I use is, you think about a lot of these apps or a lot of our platforms can be one-dimensional. It's just a photo and sometimes some information about who you are. But what technology can bring about is so much more, a much better sense of who you are. Like pictures 1,000 words, a video is so much more compelling. So the ability to bring video and voice to get a better picture of who someone is, the technologies there integrating into the experience, I think, is going to be important. And then the other piece, I think, in terms of innovation is really around location, which sort of seems like, yeah, we get it, like you have your phone and location's interesting, but to start to connect, and we've done this for some of our platforms, particularly for Tinder, where we just launched Places, where you go says a lot about who you are. So the idea that you go to a wine bar, you love comedy clubs, and where you go over the past month, you now have the ability, which we just launched on Tinder, to say, oh, these 30 users went to the same comedy club this last month. These 20 people went to the same wine bar. So be able to connect people based on what they're passionate about, what they like to do, we think is very compelling.
It's also about liquidity in the marketplace. I mean, people go where there's going to be good inventory. You use a website where you know that the people are.
I don't let anyone talk about inventory in my business. When people say that, I was like, you guys, these are people who actually want to fall in love. Oh, but
that's
yes,
true,
right.
but that's important.
Scale matters.
We're going to go to questions in just a minute, but you run this business not having spent much time yourself as a single person. You have been married for many years now. So how do you? A few times. Well, okay. But you do know. Speaking of a few times, you do know that relationships are not easy, and one of the big setbacks in your life came through relationships. And can you just tell us a bit about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I went to Wharton Business School, and I was 29, and I had a 1-year-old, and my ex-husband at the time said, actually, we don't really make sense. We're not happy. I was like, what does that have to do with marriage? But anyways, it was a good thing. So I became a single mom my first week at Wharton with a 1-year-old. And so, I mean, it just taught me.
He went back to Israel, where he was from. He didn't just stay in Philadelphia. I mean,
he left. So we're on good terms for those of you who care. But anyway, she's 20 and she's great now. This is the 1-year-old who's now 20 and in college, and she's doing great. But anyway, but I do think that first of all, it made me understand what it was like being single and what it was like, the complexity of being single and being a single mother. And I did online date, and I did get rejected, and I did have the ups and downs of dating, which I think actually shaped the way I thought and brought my perspective. And then,
but you used JDate.
I did use JDate at the time, which is funny because ironically, I am married to, I would have probably put in my profile, I'm looking for, I don't know, like a Jewish guy who's 6 feet tall, and I actually ended up marrying he's really cute, but a short Indian guy. So it just goes to show you that sometimes that like what you think you want and what you actually want are two different things. And in our algorithms, we actually take that into account, because if you say, particularly on Match, where you can actually say what you're looking for, on some of our other products, if you say, here's what I'm looking for, but then you keep reaching out to people who don't actually fit your descriptions, we can get smart and we can actually start to be more predictive about what you do versus what you say.
Interesting. Wow. Knows us better than we know ourselves.
Yes.
Who's got a question for Mandy?
Sure. Hi, I'm Trey Vassallo. The experiences for women in dating are often very different from men, at least just from the data, the online behavior. And obviously, Whitney's done some interesting things to try to put women in the driver's seat. But what are you doing with your set of companies to try to make the experience, I guess, more enjoyable for women on the platform?
Yeah. It's a great question. It's funny because from the moment I took over, I ran chemistry, I took over Match in like 2008, it is probably the number one thing that we asked, which is, what's the female experience? Because we might not market it or talk about it, but if there's not a great female experience, you actually don't have a business. Because at least with most of our couples, we service all sorts of people and all sorts of gender identities, but the vast majority of our users are heterosexual, looking for opposite sex. And so I think that it has to be not just on the back end, but how we talk about it. One of the examples is we have a business called Meetic, which is similar to Match, that's in Europe, and we created a gentleman's badge. And that gentleman's badge indicates good behavior for men. And when men, so meaning that they respond to the emails, so they get for good behavior. When you have that gentleman's badge,
Can you give that to people in real life? I mean,
we have badges made up in the back, so no. And so we've seen that women actually respond 33% higher to men that actually have good behavior. So there's a lot of things that we have to do to make sure that it's not just behind the scenes, but we are much more overt and also market that.
This is Ashish from Y Media Labs. So dating is a pretty interesting business. So in dating, the lifetime value of a consumer is pretty limited. So if you find somebody, you end up leaving. If you don't find somebody, you end up leaving. So how do you deal with this challenge?
Well, I'd say that when you're, especially with the apps, when you're young and you're 21, you're probably not looking, or 22, you're not looking to get married. And so your sort of single life spans over many, many years. So you're dating, you're not dating, you're with someone, you're back and forth inside of these dating apps. And that's generally the trend. But our goal, which is, I know seems so counterintuitive, which is very different than a lot of social networks, we actually want you to leave our platforms. And the reason that we want you to leave our platforms because of success is because you'll tell everyone about it. And that is our biggest viral growth engine. I mean, the reason that we never spent money on Tinder and it grew like crazy because people would talk about it, and then open up the New York Times and you'll see half the couples have success stories, and that's really what helps grow our business.
divorce helps too, right?
Yeah, but I don't cause that.
Sending new people back out into the
divorce rate
market.
has been 50% for many, many years.
But the interesting thing is also there's a lot of, the market is very untapped. I mean, the number of global singles in the world is huge. It's like 500 million or more, and the users of all the sites is less than 10% of that or something.
Yeah, and I just want to say, Mark said something yesterday in his speech about stock picks, and he said, you're always looking for businesses with huge TAM and very low penetration. If you think about the global market, we've spent a lot of time talking about the US, but if you look at these big markets where it's not just that there's online dating stigma, there's dating stigma, and generations who are like 20 to 30 are the first generation that are dating. I mean, look at India and Southeast Asia, and so we think there's huge opportunity for us, and half of our business is outside of the US, and so that's a big opportunity for us.
Over here.
Hi, Linda Abraham from Crimson Capital. So I've been married for a long time, so I can't say that I've used the services, but I have 4 kids ranging from 21 to 31. So we've had a lot of interesting conversations, and they've tried a lot of different sites and talk with their friends and all that. And one of the things that comes up a lot is this mentality, or almost a psychology that's developing about, even if they're in a relationship that they think might be going somewhere, there's something in the back of their head. There's like an optimization psychology that's developing. And we didn't really have that when I was younger. I'm just wondering, is that just a microcosm? Is that just something I'm seeing, or is that something that you're hearing about? It's always like, well, this may work, but I got to keep looking because there might be something better out there, and maybe it's a millennial thing, or maybe it's just something that's availed because the data is available, or more options. Is that anything you hear about?
It's funny. You know, I'm in my 40s. I heard that from my best friends 20 years ago in New York, where there's so many people, where they said, gosh, there's always new people, and there seems like there's so many options, and so it's very hard because you're always looking behind the next person, like who's the next. I think that the big benefit that online dating apps have done is create connections where there wouldn't be connections. For example, there's a study out by MIT that said last year that more people are dating cross-racial lines than ever before because you date people in your communities and people that you know, and now people are dating outside of their communities. Think about the gay population in small towns in America. How do you meet other people? And so while I think dating is bringing people together, it probably is creating an issue of like, there's so many options out there, so how do we calibrate and manage that? And I think you're right. I think that there is a lashback, and that's why there's a business that we just invested or bought, Hinge, and Hinge is also sort of pushing back on not just about sort of the swipes, but trying to get a little bit deeper so people take a little bit more time to get to know people versus looking at the next person.
It really has been gamified, I mean, for better and for worse. Right in the back, I think this will probably be our last question.
Hi, question about China and Bizan, a complete knockoff. So how do you feel about that?
Well, we actually, and I think I've
Which
talked
site
about
was
it
that?
publicly.
Was there a particular site you're talking about?
The Bazoon, may not be pronouncing the company's name right. The competitor for Tinder in China.
Do you know which one it is?
No, but I mean, we see a lot of Tantan in China is one of the bigger ones we see. But there are a lot of copycats in China, and in fact, as part of the IP, the litigation that we talked about, we actually have a settlement with Tantan because they definitely were infringing on that IP, so it's something we look at. But I mean, we also, that's a huge market for us, and figuring out not just how to look at India, Southeast Asia, but also figuring out how do we approach China, because that obviously is a huge community of young people that are dating. So it's something that we are not focused on, but evaluating.
Okay, I'll just ask one quick question. Tinder really does have this stigma of being a hookup app. I know people get married. I know people who've gotten married on there. You look at the New York Times, every third person met on Tinder. So I know that that's not totally true, but that branding seems to have not really budged. So is that a problem? Is that not, do you want it to not have that reputation? And if so, how are you going to change that?
Yeah, I think, well, we've got some work to do on that front. I think the first thing is that Tinder got introduced into college campuses, and I mean, there's people in college campuses generally don't get married, and so they're more casual. They're meeting people, they're getting to know people, and although Tinder is age certainly, and it's grown into sort of the 20-something, it is definitely a little bit more casual, and it's all about meeting people. That said, people start serious relationships. The pure volume and relationships and marriages and babies that happen on these apps are profound. And so, the press certainly had a lot of negative stories in the past, and we really didn't have a chance to go out there and tell our story. And that's part of, as we evolve the brand, like I said, Match was known as the hookup app. Snapchat was known as, out the gate is, an app where people showed pictures that they shouldn't have been showing. Things evolve, brands evolve, and I think that we've got a shot of evolving the brand if we go out there and tell these stories about the connections that are getting created.
Well, Mandy, thank you for being with us. Good luck with all the drama, and
Thank you.
we'll be watching.
Thank you.